Are you dealing with outbursts? What to do to help your child even when you aren't there? I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach parenting and good communication all over the world through the lens of the principle self-government. And in this video, we are talking about how to help children who are struggling with outbursts. We're going to be talking about why these outbursts happen and what you can do to prepare your child ahead of time so that they don't need to do those outbursts even when you're not there to stop them. Why do outbursts happen with children? Well, there are many reasons. Some children have higher levels of anxiety. All children have anxiety. They want to be understood. They want to make sure that somebody hears them and knows what they need because they want their needs to be met. These are all just basic needs for a child. But sometimes the child also wants to take control of a situation, maybe a conversation. Maybe they want to get some attention, and so they want to insert themselves into a conversation. Any way you look at it, it is bad social skills. Sometimes there are some children, maybe they're neurodiverse, that have even a little bit more of a hard time controlling their impulses and their anxiety. And when we're dealing with impulse control, is there anything that we can even do about it? Especially if the child is not with us at the time, the answer is yes. The whole point of self-government is that it is a proactive type of teaching. What does that mean, self-government, and what does that mean, proactive? The definition of self-government is being able to determine the cause and effect of any given situation and possessing a knowledge of your own behaviors so that you can control them. So what that means is that you understand how you ought to be communicating, how you ought to be behaving, which means you know that there's a best version of you that's got to come through. And then you analyze yourself on a regular basis and you align yourself with that ought version. So basically, you decide to want your ought and you become connected, want and ought together. So this does mean that we have to be open to correction and adjustment because we're never going to nail it the first time. All people make mistakes. All people do things they wish they hadn't have done after the fact. Children especially are in a learning phase. There is no such thing as a perfect child, but as I told myself years ago, I'm not in the business of making perfect children. I'm in the business of making something more important. When I was doing foster care and when I was raising my own children, I decided that my goal was to make joyful adults who knew what their mission in life is and couldn't wait to fight for it and had solid relationships with God and family. That's what I was hoping for. How do you help a child become that type of adult? Well, it is an incremental learning process. They need to learn personal management and self-regulation, but they also need to learn how to interact with other people so that they actually can be heard. What a lot of interrupters or people who do outbursts and interject in front of other people don't realize is that as soon as they do that, the other people feel controlled. So they back away from them and they start to not engage as much. This makes it so that their interactions with the other person might not go as well. They might not even be taken seriously. So being able to control that anxiety is a big deal. Even small children can learn how to control anxiety. Who is more anxious than the toddler who doesn't even have all the words to say yet? Even toddlers can learn how to tell themselves, nope, not yet. I need to wait. Or is there a right way to communicate this to my parent or to somebody else? They can learn skills for success. If you've subscribed to this channel already, then you know that this channel is dedicated to teaching the skills and principles of self-government. That's right, all of the skills are actually based upon principles, which means they're broadly applicable and they never need to change. In fact, they can't. They're just hard and fast truths that we live by. So there are skills that you can teach children even when they're tiny. It's the same types of skills that you would use when the child is older. So no matter what age your child is, whether they are a young toddler or whether they are a teen that just wants to be heard, there are things that we can do for those pesky outbursts. There is a difference between appropriate speaking and appropriate communication and inappropriate communication. The inappropriate communication we're probably familiar with, but how do we teach our children what appropriate communication is supposed to look like and sound like? Well, the first thing that we need to recognize is that every person has value around us. So you'll want to talk to your children about how you know that they want people to hear them and understand them, but everybody else wants to be heard and understood too. And so they need to make sure that they don't take over everybody's turn, otherwise people stop wanting to listen to what they have to say. This is good, insightful logic that they can probably understand. So then you might have a parent counseling session with them. Now, parent counseling sessions are a 14-step process of communicating with your child about one specific issue. So if I had a child who had a struggle with outbursts, then I would have a parent counseling session just about the outbursts. I would describe when I saw an outburst happening, or maybe describe a couple of incidences of outbursts where they could happen in the future too. And then I would talk to the child about why they think this is happening, or what thoughts they have inside that lead them to want to have these outbursts. Then I'm going to talk to them about their skills, and I'm going to say, is there a skill that we already know, maybe one of our teaching self-government skills, that you could use to help you not have an outburst but still get understood? And guess what? They're probably going to come up with skill number 4. So there are 4 basic skills of self-government. The 4th one is a skill called disagreeing appropriately. When a person disagrees appropriately, they look at the person or the situation, they keep a calm face, voice, and body. They say that they understand the other person's point of view. They share their point of view. They listen to what the other person has to say. They say okay and then drop the subject. When the person uses this skill, they are showing that they care about the other person's opinion before they even voice their opinion. This means that they have to tell themselves no and hold back on what they want to say long enough to go through the process. This takes a lot of self-restraint, but also it's very empowering, especially because people usually look at you as mature and they'll listen to what you have to say. Especially as parents, we can show them that disagreeing appropriately works by giving them our attention every time they ask to disagree appropriately. Now, there are a few instances where a child may not be allowed to disagree appropriately, but most of the time they can. I'm not going to go into the full training on that skill here because that's all taken care of in my TSG parenting course, which is on my website, teachingselfgovernment.com. But I will say that when a person chooses to disagree appropriately, if it works, they will choose to use that skill a lot more often. Even tiny children who aren't even completely vocal yet can learn to disagree appropriately. I don't know if you have seen the videos on this channel yet of my granddaughter Clara disagreeing appropriately before she can even form a complete sentence. In fact, she's using some of her sign language to help her with the disagree appropriately. What does disagree appropriately do? It helps keep the roles in the same place and helps everybody feel and be understood. Now, in order to be really good at disagreeing appropriately, you might need skill number 2 of those 4 basic skills as well, which is accepting no answers or criticism. When you accept no answers, you look at the person or situation, keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay or ask to disagree appropriately, and then drop the subject. So before I'm going to disagree appropriately, probably I'm going to have to tell myself, no, this is a no. Keep calm about it, drop the subject, or use my disagree appropriately skill. Now I transition into disagree appropriately, do that, and at the end I still have to drop the subject no matter what is said, because there's no point in arguing over it or trying to wear somebody down. This is damaging for relationships. Lots of times when we are trying to correct out of control behaviors in our children, such as outbursts, we don't proactively teach them what to do. We just keep telling them, don't. People don't like that. Don't. But we don't tell them what to do to get understood. And that's one of our biggest failings as parents. We need to be more proactive, less reactive. Self-government parenting is totally proactive, decreases anxiety, which should end up increasing their likelihood to use those skills. When I did therapeutic treatment care for troubled teens, many of the children that were in my home had neurodiversity and high levels of impulsivity and anxiety. It was hard for them to hold themselves back, but you know what? They could do it. And they ended up feeling very strong and empowered and accomplished when they could. My granddaughter, who's 2 years old, is able to disagree appropriately perfectly. She can say all of the words and form a good disagreement because she's had practice at it since she was a very little baby. So just start pre-teaching that skill today. But you do have to remember that when the person has an outburst, you do need to correct it. Now, when the child is with you, you can more easily correct those outbursts. They do need to be corrected in a predictable way if we're going to keep the anxiety levels low. If you remember, the outburst is probably happening because of impulsivity or higher levels of anxiety. If you go in with a forceful correction, that increases the anxiety, which also increases the probability that there's going to be an out of control episode. So what you can do is make sure you pre-teach the child ahead of time exactly the words you'll say every time you correct them, and then stick to it. There's tons of training on that on my TSG parenting course, which is at teachingselfgovernment.com. When your child is not with you, hopefully they will remember the why of needing to use these skills, like disagreeing appropriately and accepting no answers. Then they can come and report to you and you can praise them. Now, if someone tells you it's an issue, obviously you can still correct the situation or talk to your child about it. But most of the time you probably won't know when it's happened. And so the child will have to learn the hard knocks way, meaning they could end up losing friends or having some difficult experiences. And you'll have to talk to them about that as those things occur, how those are natural consequences to having outbursts and taking control of a conversation instead of allowing everyone to have a voice and a say. There are so many more things that I could teach you about these great skills of self-government. I highly recommend going to teachingselfgovernment.com. Look for the TSG parenting course and other resources there that are meant to help you learn and use self-government skills and principles in your family. Click on the link to teachingselfgovernment.com now, and I'll see you there.